Do you have something technical to do? Everything's done. Rob?
Sorry? Oh, yeah, no.
Now, this has to go up on the bar later on. Will I begin, James? Now, those who are here from Irish, and I'm sure they're... Sorry, I need to talk louder, don't I? Do I have to turn this on or anything, or does it just work? It just works. Can you hear me? Great, great. Anyone who's here from Ahanish will know what it's like to stand up and to have Michael McDermott looking at you and looking at his watch. And you've got 10 minutes or 15 minutes and you have to be finished. So you're going to have to indulge me today. I have 7 A4 pages. You can count them so you'll know when I'm getting to an end. But today I get to talk for as long as I want to. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Then my wonderful children are going to talk a little bit, and then you get me back again. And when that's done, it's done. So here I go. I'm not going to be reading, but I'm going to have to keep looking down to remind myself of what I have to say. Of course, glasses. I want to start by thanking you all for coming. I want to thank everyone who's been there to support us. You've got a great spot. I want to thank everyone who's been there to support us over the past few days. And then all those people who wanted to, but couldn't find the words. Because I've been that person, and it doesn't make the amount you want to support us any less. It's just some people have words and some people don't. I'm going to start with Foynes Yacht Club, because why? I just have to. This is where Conor found his place and his people. Conor was comfortable here, and he wasn't a man who would have been comfortable everywhere. But here he was comfortable. I knew straight away that this is where we had to come back with Conor. And I'm so glad that Bev and James and Foynes Yacht Club were just so good to accommodate us. Conor would find it a bit funny that here we are on Wednesday night, on the day that Wyora was due to start in Foynes. Now, the last time Wyora, for those of non-yachting people, West of Ireland Offshore Racing Association, so all the clubs from Sligo down to Foynes compete once a year, and this is serious competing. But the last time that Wyora was in Foynes, Peggy M, our boat, you'll hear lots about her, took part. We actually won. I tell people a cup, but actually it was a mug. I think we might have come third or fourth. The whole O'Regan family was with us, so they probably remember where we came. But Peggy M was here the last time. We then fecked off and started going around the world. But Wyora was to be here today. My first reaction when I heard Wyora was cancelled was, Connor'd hate that. But then I thought about it and I realised there wasn't actually any choice. And so
Is the microphone done now?
I asked that and I was told it was on all the time. Oh, is that better? I'll speak more quietly. So, anyway, the last time we were here, he would have hated you to have to cancel Wyora for him, but he would have been incredibly humbled. The other thing I have to say is, again, before we fecked off around the world, we took part in the racing in Foynes on a Wednesday night. It was a Wednesday night. And first gun was at 7 o'clock. And there's a lot of people here who on many a Wednesday would be down there at this stage, and the fancy guys who weren't us, they'd already be out circling around in the water. We left the pontoon last usually, so we didn't hit anyone. But Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, first gun would happen. Today, when we came into Foynes with Conor, I realised Conor wasn't going to be with us tonight. So I said, damn it, he has to go to Foynes, which is why I made Foynes do yet another thing for us in terms of allowing us to come down here on our way to the crematorium. I was gobsmacked. And what was so lovely, and everyone said it to me, was all the young people who left all their young people things to come out for us old farts and stand there and give Conor such a dignified, it was just wonderful. And I have to tell you something that most of you probably don't know. I like to be on time for things. So I wanted to arrive here at the time we told Foynes we would arrive here. And I knew we might be a bit early. So I decided if we were a bit early, we'd turn right and go down to Toomdeely, to the pier on the Deal, and we'd wait. So we'd be here on time. But I didn't know if we were going to do it, so I had said nothing to Cyril or any of them. And as we passed down, I could see the two lads working on a boat, and I could see them stopping and looking at us. And we were down at the pier for maybe 5 minutes. And on the way back, Cyril and all his lads in their overalls were outside for us. And you know what? It was incredible. I don't know if Cyril's here, but God, if you are, Cyril, that was lovely. That was so lovely. So you've already done just so much for us, and I'm only a quarter way through the first page. To the unbelievable kindness of the people of Connemara and Carna and the surrounding areas. They put their arms around us and they held us tight as our world fell apart. Club Mara, who I have decided are Foynes Osgoilge. Club Mara, really they are, lads. You'd walk in there and... Anyway, their boathouse became our home during the search. Well, our home except for Aideen and Fergus and I, who stayed on Peggy M. But anyway, there were people such as Bridgie, and I know I've seen Bridgie, and Pauline, and loads whose names I might not have known or I can't remember. There was Oisín, who picked me up from the island, the most beautiful island, where I'd been by myself for an hour, and he saw me there and he picked me up. To Spud, I didn't know he was Spud at the time, who came up and put his 2 arms on the side of the boat and said, "There's a load of women on the pier. Would you like me to bring a woman out to you?" And I said, I was about to say no. And I said, yes, please do. And he brought out 2, I can only call them angels, in the form of Val and Veronica, who came onto Peggy M with me, and we made tea and we talked shite as the darkness fell. And I just felt I was in the right place. And God, I was with such incredible, incredible people. They started to tell me after dark that we'd have to bring Peggy M in, that the wind was coming up and really wasn't the best place to be at anchor. Now, except that as we dropped anchor, and I said to Conor, I'd like to stay here for the night. And he said, look at XC weather. You know, we should go up to, we're not Roundstone people, you know, Dublin on holidays, but there was a little cove beside Roundstone that he wanted to go into. So when I remembered that Conor wanted us to go in, I said, well, okay, so. But before that, I was looking at the Connemara fishermen in their little black boats who searched tirelessly for Conor. And then when the guards called off the search, I could still hear the tones of Connemara Irish all around me, as the fishermen totally ignored it and told me afterwards that the guards knew they were ignoring it. And the diver, who I'm told nobody knew his name, he was called Diver, and his son, who I assumed must be called Diver, searched for Conor in the place that the fishermen thought he would be. God, the fishermen knew. And I'd say, I'd say they were right, but I think high tide and the tide turned, and the fishermen told me that strong currents after high water, unfortunately, they go both directions. So anyway, more about that later. I've talked about the Connemara fishermen, but the sound of them talk, just the comforting tones of them talking in Connemara Irish was incredible. It'll stay with me forever. To the two boats whose names I didn't know, but whose bright colours I could see throughout. The first boat I was able to pick out was a red trawler, which I subsequently found out was Pádraig Brannach's Anna Serena. She was the first boat that I noticed on the scene, way before any of the lifeboats or helicopters were able to get us. And it's just a comfort to see she was looking, and they went to the dinghy first, which had floated off. And that was what I wanted them to do, because I wanted to know, had he managed? Maybe, I knew he hadn't, but had he managed to get there? And then there was the blue boat. And any of you who were down there will have seen that blue boat in one spot. I think it must have been 24 hours a day. They stayed on the spot I last saw Conor, so people would know where I last saw him. And that was what a name, McDara Brannach's Crutnacara. The Connemara people will correct me. But Crutnacara is the real name the local people had for St. McDara's Island. What can I say? And she stayed there the whole time. Lads, I don't know how you got sleep, but just seeing you there was such a comfort. So that's, for people who didn't know, they were who the red boat and the blue boat were. I've talked about Diver. Now this bit, Veronica, thank you for your help on this. Buíochas ón Grí by me buíoch go Joe de Chuligine. Fad is a marish. It's the marish May, sorry. Oh no, marish. Sheelam go maimwich Kiangelta Igoni. I could say a whole load more about the Connemara people, but people who are standing wouldn't be able to stand by the time I'm finished. So, to the guards, Joan, who waited patiently on the quay for me to talk to me when I came in before she got the message that actually I wasn't coming in, I was staying in Peggy M, and who told me that was absolutely fine. To Niall, whose binoculars, the much better binoculars than we had in Peggy M. I must ask what binoculars the guards use, they're really good. But I kept taking his binoculars. And Michael, who met me on the boat in Clifton and couldn't have been more understanding. And to the many other guards that I can't mention who stood by us, including the divers, and treated us with such sensitivity. They were just incredible. To the Coast Guard and the Garda Dive Unit, I really didn't get to talk to them because they, again, were men who just did. They didn't talk. They didn't introduce themselves. They just did. And Conor was one of those kind of people, as you all know. We're on page 2, lads. We'll get there. Okay. To all of you, neighbours, friends and colleagues who came up to Ard for the search, it was so comforting to see the faces from Ahinish, to see Lucy's friends, who had kept, because Lucy's come over from Australia and her friends are all over the world, they kept a constantly open phone line to Lucy. It was like they were in the room with her all the time. All the time they were with her. That was I know you're watching, lads, so thank you. To Ostea and Evan, who came to support Fergus and gave him the kind of support he needed, and all his colleagues from RTR, they were there for Fergus, and you can't know how important that was. To Paulina, who was there to give Aideen a hug. You may have seen people who were up there, this most beautiful Nigerian girl. That's Aideen's Paulina. And she came there to give Aideen a hug. And that was brilliant, Paulina. And then all of the work colleagues who came for Aideen as well. I can't get started. And I also know there were people there who I never knew, who were there for Emer and Cormac and Gary and Niall. And sorry, lads, that's the only mention you're getting. But they were there for you. They were. I could see people, I've said it before, who didn't have words, didn't approach me. And you'll all know yourselves, some of the people from the club, who were there organising boats, making sure everything went clockwork like a lift out. who didn't have words. Oh, first gun, thank you. I thought it was something with the mic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. To the lads, I'm back to Connemara. Anyway, to the lads who move boats around, so that instead of having to, as the guards had suggested, bring Peggy M up to Roundstone, where there was a pier, the fishermen shifted boats around and I was given a mooring. But all I could hear was Conor's voice in my ear saying, "Do you know when it was last maintained?" And I didn't know how to ask them. They told me that during Storm Ophelia there'd been a very big boat on it and she didn't go. And I could hear Conor saying, "How long ago was Storm Ophelia?" Anyway, they gave us a mooring. Peggy M is still sitting on the mooring. And that was really, really important for us because Aideen and Fergus and I and Conor are introverts. And there's a time when you just need space around you, and to have each other. Lucy is our extrovert. She came the next day. so you have one, and sometimes she wonders how we operate. Anyway, so Aideen and Fergus and I were able to stay the 2 nights on Peggy M and have Conor all around us. One of the nights we went back. The second night we were to go back out to the boat, and Spud spent his time going backwards and forwards, doing whatever we wanted. Spud, I had asked him, I said, "Look, can we have our own dinghy?" The lads had recovered the dinghy. "Can we have our own dinghy so that we can come in and out as we want?" I don't know what we thought we'd be doing, but I had it figured that we'd have water until high tide. Until half tide. I came down, the dinghy was high and dry on the rocks, and I got a tap on my shoulder, and a lovely girl said to me, I'm told, by the way, that she's one of the best curragh racers in the country, but I didn't know that looking at her, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Look, that's our house. My dad's curragh is down there. Would you like a lift?" And Martin Corbett rowed us out to Peggy M in a boat that was just the kind of boat Conor would have loved to be in. It needed a lot of TLC. And he rowed so strongly against a bloody awful tide. And I kept forgetting Conor wasn't there. And I kept thinking, I have to tell Conor. And he rowed us out to Peggy M. And he can't have known how much that meant to us. To Moira Clohart and her brother Michael, who got up that morning on Moynish Island and said they'd go for a walk before Michael headed off abroad home. And just had a feeling that he'd walk down the tip of the island. And everyone had looked at the tip all around before, and the search was on the shoreline. And Maura saw the Dubarry boot, and we had Conor back. I know Maura's here tonight because I saw her. I'm not wearing glasses, so I can't see anyone. But Maura, thank you so much. And how lovely it was that it was a local who found him. And how poignant it was that in order to get to where he was, we had to pull up in a tiny little car park beside the old cemetery. Now, there are not many people here who know it, but I've always been fascinated by old cemeteries. I couldn't pass a cemetery without going to have a look and reading all the names. And I always thought, if somebody puts up a headstone for you and your name on it, they want somebody in 100 years' time to read it. And when you read them, you see the names that recur, and you see, well, I always loved it. Conor thought I was for the fairies, so he'd find a nice place to sit, and he'd watch me. And when we got Conor's phone, Conor had his phone with him, and when we got it back, my 2 technical wizards, Aideen and Fergus, had the SIM card out, or not, there was an SD card, and they had his photos, and they started to laugh because pretty much all his photos were of something he's about to take apart or something he's putting back together again. But the last photo he took was on Inishmaan. I don't know people who know Inishmaan, but the strand there is called Thrall Electric. I presume it's because the cable came ashore. Conor took a seat at Thrall Electric because the little cemetery was just up above that. And he has a photograph of me, and you can see Relic clearly on the wall, and you can see me up, as usual, reading the damn headstones. That that was for us, that was like, I don't know. Anyway, it was lovely that we walked past the tiny little old cemetery on Moynish down to where they found him. Unfortunately, they decided, having done a risk assessment, I'm sure, that they really had to put him on the lifeboat. Boy, what a crew they took. I, being a little bit cross that we didn't get to see him where he was, I said he is not to be taken off the lifeboat until we get there. I am so relieved we did that. And I am so relieved that Digger and his crew knew how we would feel. They brought him, we agreed to Rossaville. Now, Conor and I were not Rossaville people. We'd never been in there. We weren't really marina people. Anyway, we got into Rossaville. And they had Conor. And lads, he was Conor. He had seaweed in his hair. He had a broken nose, but he was our Conor. And we got to hold him and to talk to him for as long as we wanted. And he was totally our Conor, and he was on a boat. And they were willing to hold that boat there for as long as we needed to hold it. And his sister Emer and his brother Cormac got to see him, and he was totally our Conor. And then Michael, the guard, said to me, "Do you mind if the lifeboat men transfer him? Do they have a temporary coffin they have to use for bringing him into the hospital for the post-mortem?" I said, "Do I mind?" He would want nobody else to do it. And as I walked up the pontoon, I wasn't looking. And 6 lifeboat men shouldered Conor along the pontoon and up. Lads, it was incredible. It was incredible. Digger, I don't know the names of your crew. All I know is that thank you. Moving on slightly, we're still about half of the second page to go. To our neighbours on the North Circular Road. We weren't very sociable people. We actually didn't know lots of our neighbours. They fell over themselves to offer practical help. There could be no barbecues on the North Circular Road last night because we had all the garden furniture. Worse, there could be no cups of tea or no kettles boiled because we had all of them as well. I'm not going to say any more. I hope I'll have a good chance to thank my neighbours. And I now know that I have all these friends I didn't know I had. To my incredible goddaughter Ava, again, I'm not wearing glasses, but I know she won't be far down there. Ava operated a one-person catering company yesterday and kept us all fed. And now she did it. She spent the day before baking. Thank you, Ava. Thank you so much. You're a doer. And I really, as I say, Conor was a doer. To my wonderful family, in which I'm including Lucy's boyfriend Rob, who was her rock, and to Lorcan and Patricia. I can see Lorcan and Patricia, just about. And Tony came up to Ard. I neither have nor need the words, you know, and you just know. I'm now going to hand over to Conor's wonderful children for them to say what they want to say before you get me back and I get to talk about my Conor.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that, and she's got more as well. I'm going to read off my phone, so apologies, and also apologies if I do cry because Mom's done so well. So I know she's already done this, but I would just like to thank everyone again who was involved in the search for Dad, and everybody who brought who couldn't be there but really wanted to be there and made sure that they posted the call to action, the guards, the RNLI, everyone in Connemara and everyone in Limerick and Foynes who has been such a big help. I especially need to thank my friends Sean, Zoe and Eva, who couldn't be here but have just been on the phone to me non-stop since I found out and have been such a massive help. It just means so much. And Rob, who hasn't left my side since I found out. Thank you so much. Except when he was doing all of the garden. So I knew I wanted to say something tonight, and I was thinking about it on the plane the whole way, and I couldn't think of anything. But then as soon as I sat down and tried to write, it was really easy. He was just the best dad anyone could have had. He was the most supportive person. As many of you may know, he was a man of few words, which was perfect because I never shut up. He was so logical, like the most logical and careful person I knew. You would never catch him on social media because he probably understood it much better than the rest of us. And it took us years to get him on WhatsApp in case of a data breach or something like that. If you had Googled him a week ago, nothing would have come up about him at all, which was exactly what he wanted. Obviously that's changed now, but anyway, he'd be raging. He was just the total opposite of me in that sense, and he would be figuratively turning in his grave if he knew all my passwords are the same and my PIN code is on my phone and everything. I actually still don't know the Wi-Fi password in our house because if someone was going to be on the Wi-Fi, they needed Dad's approval before they could be on the Wi-Fi. I know everybody else is going to talk about his expertise in electronics because that was such an important feature of his relationship with everybody at Foynes and with Fergus and then even Aideen more recently. But for me, it just meant that every time I smashed my phone, he used to replace the screen. iPhones aren't designed for a DIY repair job, but he figured it out somehow. And every time he did it, he used to tell me he was going to charge me for the parts, and then he never did. And they always worked until I smashed them again. And I know when the time came for me to buy my own house that he would have done all the rewiring and re-roofing and flooring and everything that I needed. So, you know, I'm raging at him as well that he won't be there to do that because he was doing it all for Aideen. I know that Mom and Aideen and Fergus have lots of more recent special memories that they might share, but I have been in Australia for nearly 2 years and I moved out years before that. So, you know, most of my favourite memories are from when I was younger, but in November, Mom and Dad and Aideen came to Perth for a month to stay with me and Rob, and I've just thought so many times over the past few days how grateful I am to have had that time with him. They're memories I'm going to treasure for the rest of my life. We packed so much into that month. I'd say I exhausted everybody. But I just really wanted him to see as much of my life over there as possible. Some people may remember that when I was much younger, Dad was a keen scuba diver. So I was able to take him diving and snorkelling on the Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia, which was much more glamorous than what he was used to in Kilkee. And he was so happy that day and really jealous when I sent him photos a couple of months ago from the Great Barrier Reef. So I'm just so happy that we had that time. And when I said goodbye to him at the airport in Perth, you know, I could never have imagined it would be for the last time, but I'm just so grateful that it was the end of such an amazing month together. I've often said that I feel like he and Mom did such a good job of raising us to be independent. Before I was born, he did loads of research, true to form, and he told Mom that he had read in a book that the most important thing in raising a child was to give them roots and give them wings. And I just always kind of held on to that. And I know he was so proud that I had spread my wings and gone about as far away as possible. But I knew I had such strong roots to come back to, and that was always the plan, to come back. And I just always remember, I've said this so much to Rob as well, when we were young and whenever we asked why we weren't allowed to do something, he used to say, because I'm mean and nasty and I don't want you to have any fun. And I was so looking forward to saying that to my own kids in front of him. And I'm still going to. He just would have been the best granddad. He really would. And when the time comes, I'm just going to carry on so much of what he taught me. And he was just so constant and dependable. And I always knew he was there. And I'll miss him every day. But thank you all so much.
Hi, I'm next. Really great set to follow now. I'm Aideen. Hi. I'll get this a bit lower now for me. I was very lucky to get a lot of Dad in the last few months, since buying a little house in Dublin, and since they both said just how much Dad shows he cares through action. I got a chance to ask for a lot of action. So my little house, it's a Victorian terrace with lots of original stuff, which means lots of things to fix. And one of my favourite things when I viewed the place is the windows, old wooden sash windows. But the higgledy-piggledy, I mean, different panes in every window, every one of them painted shut, broken sash cords everywhere. So I knew from the start that we were going to need to do something with the windows, but couldn't get rid of any character. Wasn't going to do any PVC or modernisation on the place. So I had done my research with Dad, and we realised Meath was the place to go for new hardwood sash windows. And you who know me know I'm absolutely allergic to driving. I hate it. But public transport wasn't going to get me to a field in the middle of Trim. So, and Dad said, sure, he'd drive me, which was ideal because Dad's the best person to bring. He'd be able to see through all the bullshit of the sales, and he'd pick out the little details that I know I'd definitely miss. So these showrooms, they're not open on normal hours. It had to be a weekday. So I booked a day off work, and I was a little bit pissed off at that time. I would have loved to do it on a Saturday, but now I'm so glad I took a Monday off. And the night before, Mom and Dad, they were over at my grandparents' house to install a new Ring doorbell. And then they came over to mine, and I made them a dinner, a lovely pasta sauce. And we had a bottle of Lidl's finest wine, which was actually very nice, but sure, none of us know any better with wine. And then we walked Mum to the Lewis stop to get back out to my grandparents for the night. And Dad and I popped into a little pub I've been meaning to go to for a while, which is one of the oldest pubs in Dublin. It's the Capstan Bar from the early 1600s. And Dad had wanted a good Guinness while in Dublin because I only live 10 minutes away from the Guinness storehouse. So we sat in there, and he had a pint of Guinness and I had a glass of Guinness, and we chatted all night. But he chatted all night, which, you know, is unusual for him. But when you get him onto a topic that he's interested in at the time, this last few months has been Trump. He's been very interested in all the developments there. Anti-Trump, obviously, I don't need to say to any of y'all. But he's so invested in all of the court cases and which judge is interested in who and what's going on. And normally we just let him talk for a while and then we have to stop him. And this night I didn't stop him. And he kept going until they kicked us out. And it was lovely. It was a lovely chat. And we talked for hours. And then we walked back to my house, and I had him in the spare bedroom where if you put in the bed, you can almost close the door and have the bed in there. He was fine with that, perfectly grand. So next morning, we got up and drove out to the first window showroom. And this one we both had great fun with because they had the whole workshop. We got to walk through the workshop and see every process of everything. And Dad was asking all the questions about all the tools and this big conveyor belt they had for painting the windows. And so then we left there and went on to the second window showroom. And there was even more interesting because they had a restoration options. They had two windows they had taken from the same house. And one they had restored and one they hadn't. And so we were looking at all the things that they had did, and we reckon like restoring, that's a lovely option. But then we got chatting to them, and it turns out when they restore your windows, they take your windows and then they bring them back in 6 weeks. And what am I meant to do there? So we got in the car and we were both in full data mode, going through every point we had seen, every little fact and figure and everything. And I think it had occurred to both of us, but it took a while for us both to admit that, sure, what can they do that we can't? Well, that we can't learn to do. So we decided the two of us are going to restore the windows. We were going to change the panes, we were going to change the sash cords, get all the paint off, get them moving. And because at that stage, Dad had already got 3 of my windows moving. He chipped through the paint to get the windows opening, because I need an opening bathroom window. I feel that's important. And he had managed to get the one in my office. He had fixed the cord so I could open that window. And so in these last few months, I've been able to sit in my little office space, which is the spare bedroom that he'd sleep in with the mostly closing door, and open the window and hear the children playing in the school next door, and the bees buzzing around in the cherry tree in the garden, and the breeze is coming in, and it's all him. And Fergus is going to help me do the windows. We're going to restore them. We'll learn what we need to learn. We won't do it as well as Dad, but we'll know he's with us. And I will be able to sit in any room of the house and look out through the windows and see Dad in it all. And I'm so grateful to have had him. And I meant to thank everyone at the start, but I'll thank everyone at the end. Oh God, you've all been incredible. And thank you so much. And I don't know what it is.
Hello. I have been hearing a lot of people saying about how he could fix everything. And I've been thinking more into that. And I've realised there's more layers to it. Because there were some things which he never fixed. And I've realised it was because he never saw them as broken. So the main door to our kitchen, living room, you close it and it bounces open. And he tells you, oh, go back up and close that again. And you do it sometimes 2 or 3 times and you'll get it to click closed. And at one point I asked him why we never got that fixed. And he said, sure, the door's warped. And I think I asked a couple more questions about, well, why haven't we fixed the warped door or got a door that isn't warped? But it was never enough of a problem to him to actually fix it. And even asking those questions, it never dawned on him that this was a problem. Because he saw the problems that he wanted to fix. And some of those were... I was being reminded about a specific one there, which was when Anne, Mom's sister, got a Roomba. So the robot vacuum cleaner when they were first out. And when they weren't really designed well yet, and there was something up with it. And so it was given down to him to fix, because everything was given to him to fix. And he quickly sorted out the actual problem and set it going in the room and decided, sure, that's shit. It's not working properly. And so he went in and he worked out how to program it. And he saw, well, they've programmed it, but they could have done that better. So he rewrote the program for the Roomba. And I would say maybe 6 months later, Anne got her Roomba back. But she got it, and I would say it was the best Roomba at the time that you could get. And I'm sure he never noticed the 6 months that she didn't have a Hoover. But that's the type of thing he worked on. And yeah, I had another object of his there, which is another thing of him creating a problem for himself that he didn't need to solve. So he had gotten very into this game called geocaching. So you hide a box somewhere, you post the coordinates online, and people can go and find that and sign a logbook. And so he started hiding a few of those around Limerick, and people were finding them all, and it wasn't a lot of fun for him. So he realised there was another layer where you could make it a puzzle. So you find something that'll lead you to the actual hidden logbook, and so a lot less people will get that. And so he started working on this, where his idea was, well, he always did electronics. He was going to have lights flashing to give some kind of Morse code thing. But then he didn't want to have to go and change a battery in something. So he tried to work out how he could have lights flashing without a battery. And he came up with this whole system where he has a tube in the middle here with a magnet that can slide up and down it and charges up a little capacitor there. So it gives it just enough power to flash these 3 lights with some kind of code he's programmed, which obviously he didn't tell any of us what it actually was. And the funny thing about it was he was never happy enough with it to actually put it out there, and I think he was working on the next iteration, and there's a box of spare parts for it at home. But yeah, he made problems for himself and always solved them. Anyway.
So you've now heard from Conor's 3 wonderful children who are all completely different from each other and all have big slices of Conor in them. We laugh about that sometimes. Lucy's told you about the roots and the wings, but Conor was so thrilled with each new feather they grew. And he thought it was really, really important as they grew up and developed their feathers that we had something for us to do, so they didn't have to feel that they were our life and that they had to keep sticking around to be our life. Enter Peggy M. Anyway, he really, really wanted that. He wanted them to be able to fly and not to have to think about us. So now I'm ready to talk about my Conor. I'm saying that because at different stages today and yesterday, we've had the McLoughlin Conor. We've had our family's Conor. This time you're getting all mine. So Conor was a decent man. He found his God in his family, and in the sea, and in the sky, and in the stars, and all around him. He was a very smart engineer. I was shocked with things people told me yesterday, because he never talked about work. I talked about work and he listened. His background was electronics, as you might have gathered, but his career was spent as a software engineer, working at machine level. Despite being a damn decent engineer, at heart, Conor was a craftsman. That's what he was born to be. He was measured, he was careful, he was skillful. That was my Conor. Conor sailed a Fireball with Patrick O'Callaghan, who I believe is here, and who also Ed Lowe, member of the club, and Pat Calloo, who often sails here. They sailed Fireballs at the same time. And I've plenty of stories, but I won't bore you. But for those who don't know Fireballs, they are very, very fast planing dinghies. So they get up on a plane and they go bloody fast. Not anything like what Peggy M can do. But there's a place for the helm to sit with the tiller, but the crew is on a wire, so you have a harness and a wire to the top of the mast, and you put your feet on the outside and you lean back. So when I went sailing with Conor, I was crew. When the boat's about to capsize and your crew out on a wire, it's a bloody long way down, and there's this big metal yoke sticking out, which I will always hit on the way down. I hated the Fireball. So I said to Conor, I began thinking I loved sailing, and I said, Conor, I'm going to get a day sailor, I think. Now, at this stage, Conor and I were strictly friends. I must say, where had I got? Oh, yes, I have to go back a paragraph to explain how we were strictly friends. But I met Conor through sailing, and I was very happy to have him as a friend, but I wasn't looking for anything else. But he discovered that I was a very reluctant, very bad cook. And he would invite me round to dinner. And when I left, I would be given, he'd make 3 or 4 times what was needed, and I'd be given the casserole to take with me. So that kept me going for the rest of the week. So I was never about to turn down an invitation to dinner. And it was mainly, we still make his chilli all the time. And his chilli is what I remember. So I'll come back to that. That was how I met Conor anyway. And I've told you about the Fireball. I hated it. Anyway, I was going to buy my day sailor. And Conor said, I'll go halves in that. And I thought, OK. But we were just friends, so we set up a bank account for the boat. And we each put £5,000, as they were then, into it for the boat. And that was to cover buying the boat and anything that was needed for the boat. And we knew what we wanted. It was a fiberglass. Those of you who can remember back as far as I can, this was a 1970s dinghy, fiberglass, called an Alban Vega. Good boat. We knew there was no internet. Well, there was a little bit of internet, but we looked all around and we knew all the boatyards on the south coast of England and the west coast up to Wales. And we went over for a week to look at all the Alban Vegas. And we went into one particular boatyard, and the people in the brokerage told us it was lunchtime. They'd bring us out to the Alban Vega after lunch. Here's the keys of the boatyard, and there's a few old boats up there that haven't been sold. So I climbed up a ladder at the back of one boat and looked under the tarpaulin. And there was I looking at a varnished mahogany cockpit. You'll see there'll be photographs coming up. I fell in love with it, but Conor was so practical. He thought this was daft. This boat was varnished mahogany on oak frames. We travelled this was in Wales, we travelled right down to Falmouth and right back. By the time we got back, I was getting my Falmouth pilot. I could tell you loads of stories about that boat and getting her home to Ireland. Gabriel Hen brought her home to Ireland with us. And engine clapped out before we reached Waterford. The sails, sure, I didn't know anything about sails. They were going to have holes in them the first time they were used. But we named her Anya Naguiha. And somebody in Cyril's yard asked us, what did Anya Naguiha mean? And I said, it's Anne of the Winds. And she said back to me, that's Windy Annie. And ever afterwards, we never called her Anya Naguiha again. That was her nameplate. But she was Windy Annie, or Annie. And we had such fun on her. 1 minute now, 1 minute. Yes. Very, very quickly, the boat account depleted. Neither of us mentioned it. We just bought things, and we didn't mention that there wasn't any money anymore. Financial entanglement is a very bad thing. Anyway, I felt we brought Windy Annie into the shed in Kilrush, the boat shed. I think it has a roof on it now, but there was lots of the roof missing then. Conor, so everything got stripped down. He replaced, I would say, 2,000 brass screws with silicon bronze. One Saturday, it took him the whole day to get one screw out. But we had to redo the deck completely. So we took off, again, sorry about the lack of risk assessment, we took off the guardrails and we took off the tow rails so I could sand the deck. I got very, very drawn into sanding the deck. And on one particular day, I crawled backwards off Windy Annie, which would have been fine if she was in the water, but she wasn't. And I landed on a concrete floor and I broke my knee. So Conor decided that really he had to look after me, so he had to move in to look after me. And, you know, the rest is history. Anyway. We got married in February 1996. It was February because we needed to have Windy Annie in the water to sail around Ireland for our honeymoon. Anyway, so we had loads of work to do. So my mum, and I know she's watching, and my two sisters, Anne and Emer, looked after the wedding in its entirety. A week before the wedding, they found an uilleann piper busking in Grafton Street, cancelled the organist, and we had an uilleann piper. Anyway, I knew I'd be able to persuade my friends at Ahinish because, well, everyone at Ahinish was my friend, to give me 3 months off for the honeymoon. We were going to... I hope that means the first boat is back. Anyway, it was very, very rarely for us, but I'll come to that. Anyway, I knew I'd get my 3 months off. We wanted to sail around Ireland for our honeymoon. Conor was, I can't really ask for that amount of time off. You know, I knew he'd do it. You know, we'd get there. And I just had to take it slowly. But in the meantime, we realised that Lucy would have been born someplace around Carrickfergus. And we put our circumnavigation off, and we got to do it in 2021. In preparation, I'm jumping around a bit because I keep forgetting to look at this. In preparation for sailing around Ireland, Cyril Ryan put one of his first beta engines into Windy Annie, and we got new cream sails. We had everything. I believe the person who... Second boat in. It doesn't go on for a long time if it's going to wait until Peggy M would get in. Anyway, I know the person who bought the boat afterwards really only wanted the engine. What a shame. But Cyril told us before Peggy M was eventually going to go on the bonfire. And he allowed us to come on board and take all the bits we wanted. And Fergus took the nameplate that Conor had fabulously carved for the back of the boat. I didn't know he took it. And I got that for Christmas, and it was such a fabulous Christmas present. So, we'll move on a little bit. I think I'm only on page 3. Actually, it's not 7 pages, it's 6. You can anyway. So in the meantime, we had our 3 absolutely wonderful children, Lucy, Aideen and Fergus. Lucy was his 40th birthday present. She arrived quite close to his 40th birthday, and I told him I couldn't be going getting a present. I got a big ribbon. And I had it around Lucy, and she still likes that photograph. Aideen, as you've gathered, a software engineer like her dad, and Fergus, to whom electronics and fixing things come as naturally as they did to Conor. He's not into circuit diagrams. He's not into reading the books. But he gets there just as fast. I see in them, in so many ways, Conor, and that means so much to me. I've said before, Conor was a decent man, and he was a man of few words, which, having listened to me, you will realise was a good thing. I discovered talking to people yesterday that actually when Conor was at work and things, he talked. Anyway, he was truly my other half. You hear the term other half. But Conor, he was my other half. He didn't talk, I did. I could have all the harebrained schemes I wanted because Conor would say things like, I'm a bit concerned about. I'm reluctant to. He never said no. And when he'd say, I'm reluctant to, I said, fine, you're reluctant to, but will you or won't you? And if it was at all possible, he would. We used to joke that if Peggy M were all Conors, she would be the most electronically up-to-date, best-maintained boat. Hard to beat. I'm apologising now because names are going hard to beat Tony Flynn's boats because we used to look at them with a bit of envy. But she would have even beaten that in Foynes, but she would never have got as far as Glyn. If she were mine, we'd be on our way to Iceland and we'd sink before we got to Glyn. So that worked really, really well. I'd start a few years before about where we were going to go. Conor never thought we'd go to Norway. I knew we'd go to the Faroes. Conor hadn't got there yet, but he would get there. I did the planning, Conor did the doing. I finished his sentences. I butted into his stories because I thought that was more efficient. I did the talking and Conor did the thinking. Conor was our rock. At the 30-year celebrations for Anish, somebody, and I am sure that Tom Murray and James McCormick had a lot to do with it, said it would be a really good idea to have a kind of a celebration down in Foynes, a bit like what happened a few weeks ago. And there would be sailing for people who wanted to sail, and there'd be walking on the island for people who wanted to walk on the island. And of course, we wanted to sail. And I can't remember what the story was with Conor at the time, but Fergus and I came down here. And we were assigned to Enzo with Mike and Rose. And I came back that evening to Conor and I said, you know, Conor, it's time to start looking for that boat we were going to get when all the kids were grown up. They'd no interest in sailing, so unfortunately Windy Annie had to go when Fergus was born. She only had four berths, we told them. The girls thought that if the choice was between Fergus and Windy Annie, we should have taken Windy Annie, but you know, I know they don't think that now. Anyway. So it didn't take too many days, it was actually very short before Conor agreed with me that we needed another boat. And we started our search. So we saw Peggy in Troon in Scotland in the winter, late, probably November 2016. And we sailed her home, starting in stages, starting Patrick's Weekend in 2017. Lorcan and Patricia came with us for the maiden voyage. We had to leave Troon into 30-knot headwinds. We really didn't, neither of us had the courage to go on deck and put up the sails, so this was motoring. But we had an autohelm. Within a few miles, the gears were stripped on the autohelm. By the time we realised we had to pull into Stranraer. Lads, if you're ever going to Stranraer and you like marinas, it's the place. The harbour master is a woman, and the bathrooms have heated floors. Incredible place to go into. Anyway, we went into Stranraer. In Stranraer, I let the flag halyard up the mast. Conor had to climb the mast. On the way down, well, that night, Lorcan and Patricia kindly were able to tell us that we had some leaks in the forward cabin. They had to move to the main area because it was soaking, but it was very nice of you lads to find them for us. We arrived up in Foynes in May 2017 on a Wednesday night in the middle of the races. Conor, being a very careful person, said we couldn't come up in the middle of a race. So we got on the radio on Channel 72 to ask them where we should go. And the Foynes lads didn't really understand why we were asking, because we didn't know then that boats like Battle and Dexterity and Gambit could turn on a sixpence, and Peggy M slowly making her way up the middle was not going to make any difference. Tom Murray had told us we really should take part in the racing, so we did. We were the only boat that raced with 50 metres of chain, 200 litres of water and a dinghy on the back. Tom was right. We enjoyed it so much and we had so much fun. So I would advise anyone to do it. Lads, it doesn't matter how you can sail. It doesn't matter what kind of boat you are. It's great fun. And I hope to get that when I next get back behind the wheel, because of course Peggy M is not living Foynes, that I'll see Avril and Paul on Connemara there too, and all the other boats who maybe feel racing is for other people. If Peggy M can do it, anyone can do it. And especially now that Foynes has become like the fancy Dublin clubs and has Ger Reedy's Kilteary as a committee boat. Who has a committee boat? Anyway, our natural competitors, Peggy M's, were Tom Murray's Kerry Dream, Bev Lowe's Pucheen, Jamie Reedy's Wildcat, and Kevin Reedy's Kevin Reedy's Sea Smoke. By the way, Sea Smoke is up for sale if anyone's looking for a good boat. When she got in there, things were difficult. So none of us had a chance, any of us really had a chance, if James took out Alpara, because he was in the same class as us and he was never, ever going to win. It was a good night if we could beat any of the other three, though, although we always felt that Kerry Dream had an unfair handicap. Tom won far too often. We're getting there. When the wind was light, Peggy M could be in full sail and going backwards if the tide was against her. We looked good. There was one particular race, I think we crossed the start line 3 times and then the fast boats came in. The race was over. Our first year, there's an annual race in Foynes called the Foynes to Kappa race. And of course we were going to take part. You might remember the year, lads, because Dexterity's mainsail split on the start line. We headed off. The IRC boats, these are the fast boats with the fancy sails, arrived in to Kappa an hour before us. I think they presumed there was no one else coming. In fact, they were up in the pub. Someone had to call them. We arrived in an hour later and we realised all the other white sails had retired. We won the cup. And on the boat with us that day, we had a school friend of Fergus's called Jordan and his mum, Maura. And I remember as we were going out into these horrendous conditions, Maura turned to me and she said, "Is this normal?" And I said, "Oh, it is totally, Maura. I've never told you, Maura, that wasn't normal." When we'd come in, we'd love to see Golden Copper, GK, on the pontoon. Because we really weren't very good in the beginning at tying up. And we knew that, first of all, John Conway wouldn't notice another scratch. And secondly, even if he did notice, he wouldn't care. He was there for the sailing. So if Golden Copper was there, it was good. And lads, for times when Golden Copper isn't there, under her new skipper, you all need to buy new fenders. Now, the man who will tell you why you need that is Pat Keating. The first time I went to bring Peggy in on my own, I took away a big chunk of Excalibur's rubbing strake. It was supposed to be for rubbing, not for hacking. And when we got in, I put it on my Excel spreadsheet of Conor's do list for the winter. So Excalibur got some new mahogany, scarfed into her tow rail. But, you know, I don't have Conor to do it anymore, lads. Fenders, you need fenders. Anyway. We took part in the first, well, I told you that, I won't go back to that anymore. What I would say is the race that we won our first mug in, rather than a cup, we narrowly beat Pat Finucane's Marengo. We shouldn't have, he was a much better sailor. But I think he got some kind of a header and he was gone. And we won anyway. Well, we didn't win, like we won, we beat him. That was fine. If we beat a boat, we knew. So Conor retired from Intel in 2020, taking early retirement and being delighted to devote all his time to my Excel spreadsheet of what Peggy M needed. Anyone who was at the house yesterday will have realised Peggy M was way up at the top of them, at the top of the spreadsheet. You know, things like stair carpets and that, they were further down. So he wanted to get ready for our sailing Peggy M around Ireland slowly, which we did. The kids, prompted by Fergus, got him a 3D printer when he retired. Lads, you wouldn't believe the number of things on a boat that you can 3D print. When you have time, I'll show you all of the things Conor printed on Peggy M. We still have the files, so Fergus knows how to print them. We sailed around Ireland in 2021, COVID, you know, we didn't see a boat between leaving Foynes and Tory Island. It was incredible. Now, we're talking introverts here, so that was incredible. The kids phoned us every day or more, so we didn't feel like we were abandoning them. They knew that even though we wanted them to have wings and we wanted them to feel they didn't need to do anything, they still needed to check up on us. But doing it, I started to write a blog for my parents who, you know, were getting on and loved to be able to live life through us. So I wrote a little blog every evening and added photographs. I got better as time went on. And then over time, when we were having to do things, we found ourselves looking at it. And we realised how brilliant it was to look back on. And so we said, even when my parents didn't need the blog anymore, we were going to continue to write it. And that's how you have literally thousands of our favourite photographs. Well, that's how we have them. And Mum and Dad, I hope you, I know you're watching, and thanks for making us do that. What I would say is when we got to Dunleary, we had to be in Dunleary for the 10th of August because that was going to be my mother's 90th birthday. But I'd also promised my dad he was coming out sailing because I first went on the water in Dunleary with my dad in his fishing boat. And I just loved everything about it. Not the fishing. I loved being out there. Anyway, so Dad came out with us. We only realised as Dad was getting on the boat that his knees didn't work very well. We got him on the boat, and he enjoyed it. And then my mother, I think, didn't want to be left out. Sorry now, Mama, but didn't want to be left out. And she decided to come with us for a little trip. And she did. And we picked up a rope around the propeller on the way back. Another story I'll tell you another day. But we never got around to taking a photograph of my mother on the boat. So someplace here you'll see a photograph of all of us. And my mother's on the boat. But the reason she's wearing an evening dress is Aideen cropped her out of one of her 90th birthday party photographs. But she looks perfect, so if you do see it, take a good look. In 2022, we went to the north of Holland, stopping with Gary's family on the way. Lucy met us in Amsterdam. Aideen met us on the way back in Brittany. We reread Riddle of the Sands before we went because we just needed to get back to that place. It was brilliant. It was a fabulous holiday. I have to say at this point, the Gambit crew, you are going to have the most incredible time bringing your super yacht home. You're really, really going to enjoy it. Pass by Belgium very quickly, though. You know, no point stopping. Anyway, I hope there are no Belgians here. In 2023, it was Norway via the Outer Hebrides, Orkney and Shetland. Conor was especially proud of the last-minute decision we made when we were on Tory. Easterlies. We were supposed to be going across and up to Islay. And I said to him, Easterlies, Conor, you know, Barra is up there, in the Outer Hebrides. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you're right. And he didn't spend days thinking about it, he spent minutes thinking about it. And we left them the next morning in a strong easterly. We averaged 6 knots, lads. And we went straight from Tory Island to Barra, which is really Tory Island owned by the Scots, if you know what I mean, because they're all the Irish people up there. And you go halfway up and you stop, it changes from being the Catholics to the Free Presbyterians who don't open their playgrounds on a Sunday. Anyway, it was but they were still the nicest people. And they spoke what they called Gaelic, and we had great fun. We could read anything they had written down. But I asked them to say it. And anyway, I've only 2 pages left, I think. Each time we came back from our travels, we used to say that the west coast of Ireland was the nicest of it all. And last year, Conor said, normally, as you can imagine, it seems that it was me choosing it. He said, you know, I'd like to do Ireland very slowly again next year. We always say it's the best. And he said, I'd love to spend 2 months on the west coast. And, you know, when Conor said something that made sense, I did listen to him. It wasn't just the scenery. The scenery, you have beautiful scenery in Scotland, it's spectacular scenery in Norway. It was the people. every place we stopped, we met wonderful people. I'm going to tell you another little aside now. On the morning of the day we went to St. Macdara's Island, we had met on the slipway the day before a Connemara fisherman. I also discovered a historian and collector, but Connemara fisherman who was getting his pots ready. And I asked him what his name was, and he told me that he was John Keneally. And I said, they don't call you that here. And he said, I hope I get this right, I'm John Baba Jack O'Keneally. So, as we were leaving, he had brought our dinghy up high so we wouldn't be, anyway. He said, when I'm out in the morning, if I have a few lobsters, I'll throw them into the cockpit for you. And we said, oh, thanks so much. But what we didn't say to him was, well, Conor didn't eat seafood. And neither of us knew about how we go about killing a lobster. So the very, very poor coverage there, and I did all my research. In the morning, we heard the curragh clatter against the boat, and kind of a clatter. And we said, heck, these are the lobsters. And anyway, it was a while before we got up, and Conor always made the breakfast because I can't talk to people in the morning. And he'd come back to me to tell me breakfast was ready, and there was a kettle of boiling water in the heads for me so I could have a shower. And he came in and he said, kettle's ready for you. He said, I can't see the lobsters. He said, you might be better at finding them because I could always find things he couldn't find. I went out, there were no lobsters. And then we were worried about what we'd say because we wanted to thank John Baba Jack O'Keneally. And we decided that we would tell him that we didn't get up soon enough and that lobsters had escaped. But we didn't want to tell him until we were outside Gollum Harbour because he'd only feel that we were asking for more lobsters. So, as we went towards the exit, Conor said to me, he had promised me that he'd try some because I wanted to cook a lobster. And he said, I don't really eat lobster. He said, can we let the small one go? So Conor got down with the scissors and he undid the tape on the claw. And I was telling him it wasn't the right place to throw it overboard. And he said, he's going to find other lobsters for God's sake. So his lobster went overboard. And one of the angels who met me on Peggy M put my lobster back overboard later that night. So, John Baba Jack, I'm so sorry. But you know what? It was a fabulous thing to happen to us on the last morning. Anyway, I have some other asides about Westport Sailing Club, but they're just out of time to go into. Anyway, I told you that. And so it was that on last Thursday afternoon, we found ourselves on St. Macdara's Island. You may not remember, it was a beautiful, beautiful day. The sun was shining. We could have done with more wind, but we had all the time in the world. We had the sails up as soon as we left Gollum Harbour, and we tacked the whole way up to St. Macdara's Island. Now, it so happened I was on the helm when we came in because Conor would have the engine on like half an hour before we came in. I didn't turn the engine on until I told Conor to drop the anchor. Of course, I had dropped it in not the perfect place, but it was fine. We sat, it was our first chance this year because we didn't have such cold winds, to sit in the cockpit and have a cup of tea before we went ashore. So we took the dinghy ashore and we were thrilled that we've come ashore in waves before. And you end up with a very, very wet backside before you get out of the dinghy. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I said to Conor, it's high water. We don't have to pull the dinghy up that far. And we have a massively long painter. That's the rope at the front of a dinghy. And he brought it up the beach, listened to my crap, of course, about not having to pull the dinghy up very far. And he came down with a big rock and he threw it down on the painter. And he said, that's going nowhere. And it did flick through my mind. Conor normally put a knot in that, but, not have to go through that rigmarole was great. And we went up to the little oratory on St. Macdara's Island. Lads, it's a magical place. And we weren't going to stay long because we needed to get up to this place near Roundstone. And we turned to come down, and I could see water all around the dinghy. And I said, Conor, we got it wrong on the tides. You better go down and pull the dinghy up. And he said to me, because he knew I wanted a photograph for the blog, and I wanted the oratory, and I wanted Conor, and I wanted Peggy M at anchor. And he started down, and then he turned around and he said, take your photograph, And any of you young people who saw the Instagram, that's the photograph. And I went looking at the beautiful wild irises, and when I looked up, Conor was it looked like he was swimming after the dinghy. And I thought, this is the most careful man on earth. This is what came out in the beginning, because I phoned the Coast Guard and I said, he's swimming after the dinghy. I can't understand this. Why? What would make Conor swim after a dinghy? But what I realised afterwards, what happened was, he went to grab the painter and it was just out of reach. And he took another step and it was just out of reach. And the third step, he was over the ledge we didn't remember. And the weed had him. So I got down there and I was only metres away from him. And he turned around, sensible as ever, and Conor said, get help. And I got help, or at least I phoned. And Conor swam for about another minute. And he went under and he didn't come up again. But you know, lads, if you could pick a place and a time and a weather, who wouldn't pick it? We'd often talked about how we hoped when we were both getting doddery at 85 that we'd find a nice rock someplace and we'd surreptitiously run Peggy M up on it, because that's the way we wanted to go. So Conor went the way he wanted to go, in a place, who gets to pick that place? Who gets to pick it? On a beautiful, beautiful day. He just did it like 30 years too soon. But like, he got most of it right. He got most of it right. Anyway. Yeah. At the end of the RIP, there was a quote in Irish from the barometer. I know Pat Lawless is over there. From the barometer I bought from Pat for Conor for Christmas. And it said, I haven't actually got it written down here, but it said, Ní féidir an gaoth ahrú, ach is féidir na seolta ahrú. So today is a day for being happy that we had Conor and had such a wonderful life, and that we knew we had such a wonderful life. We knew it. 5 times that day we must have said to each other how lucky we were. And that's why I'm happy. This is a happy day. After this week, we'll start adjusting the sails and I might not be the same. So for those of you who need to go, Conor would have understood the person who wants to come in. They've done their bit and he would so appreciate it, and he wouldn't mind you going. And for those who have time to stay, please do. Please talk shite about boats and about Conor and about what you remember about Conor. Please don't. People who have to go, by all means, come up to me and I'll say hello to you. But everyone else, I'll be moving around and I'll get a chance to chat with you. And if some of the chatting and the stories are about my Conor, then I'll be happy. Thanks. Foynes always do everything right.
I just wanted to give this to you. We went to McLoughlin's and there was a little feather on each side. And we had a local artist.
Oh, you're so good. Veronica was one of my angels on the boat. Thank you, Veronica. That is the loveliest thing. Thank you so much. Lads, you don't have to stay quiet now. You can start enjoying yourself. It's not. It's St. McDara's Island with Conor and Peggy M. Oh, that is so. I just run out of words. I've run out of words, which doesn't happen to me very often. Thank you so much. Now you can enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. There's not many things I want to say here, but I want to follow that, like to say, from the Foynes Yacht Club. Will be a sadder place for a while after Conor's passing, and hopefully we'll see Peggy in decided to write that